What is a complete human? Is it a cover model? Is it a science geek? Is it a fitness expert? Or all of the above and more? Jana and Evan are crusaders that walk the earth looking at today's issues that touch our hearts and minds. The honest and hopeful outlook on the advancement of today's society. The science behind the decay of human relationships. The necessary preparations for future generations. Join us as we look deep inside ourselves and embark on a journey into becoming a complete human.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of the Complete Human Podcast with your hosts,
Jana Breslin
and Evan DeMarco. Since the dawn of time, man has been looking for a way to live better and longer. And this practice, if we want to call it this, through better understanding of human body and technological advancements, has evolved into something basically most people call biohacking. And in the world of biohacking, perhaps there is no greater practitioner of that ancient craft than our next guest. You might know him from his New York Times bestselling books, his wildly successful podcast, or his amazing social media content, which gets my co-host a little Twitter-pated sometimes. Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Greenfield.
Welcome, Ben.
Hey, did you just call biohacking an ancient craft?
I did.
Wow, I think that's a first.
Well,
that I've heard it referred to as like ancient wisdom versus like, I don't know, sticking laser lights up your butt is not something I imagine our caveman ancestors did. But
well,
I guess they probably did some of that. They did some of that perennial sunning, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look back at the dawn of time, since the dawn of time, and I think we've always looked for ways to improve our health. We've always looked for ways to improve our lifespan, right? You've got the Holy Grail, you've got the Fountain of Youth. Now, are those myths or are those biohacks? I think that's debatable, but whether it's horny goat weed, looking for, that guys were eating to try to improve virility or anything like that, there's always been this kind of undercurrent of we can live better. And it's only now through all of the technology that we've kind of been able to apply the science and our understanding of the body to things that actually work.
Right. Or just technology. I mean, a lot of people, like I've had some clients or whatever, they'll be like, well, I want to do this and this and this and get healthier and live longer and poop better, but I don't want to take any supplements because that's unnatural. And I'm like, dude, from the animal kingdom to our ancestors using like, mortar and pestle and leaves and twigs and roots and berries, we're just doing the same thing. We just developed, encapsulation technology, for example, for some of the nutrients that we harness from plants, or we've developed, say, like, red light therapy panels. We can get heftier doses of near and far infrared without, necessarily, toasting our skin to a crisp in the sunshine. But yeah, it's kind of funny that most of what we do, or a large majority of what kind of like the smart biohackers do, in terms of harnessing technology to do what our ancestors did, but maybe a little bit less efficiently, is sometimes looked upon as like unnatural or ahuman, when in fact, I think it's just better living through science and doing exactly what our ancestors probably would have done had they had access to the same type of science we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants to die early. Nobody wants to live in pain. Everybody wants to, feel great and optimize their lives the best way they can. So there seems to be that, that convergence of ideologies. And it's kind of funny. These are the same people that go on late night TV and buy the face cream that said, from the 5,000-year-old Egyptian recipe. And it's like, 5,000 years ago, Egyptians rubbed urine on their face for, so it's like, You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, I heard Cleopatra took baths in milk, which actually I haven't tried that. You guys taking a milk bath yet?
No.
A milk what?
A milk bath.
Milk bath?
A milk bath.
No.
Yeah, I just have to figure out a way how to efficiently do that. I don't know how I could get that much milk into my upstairs bathtub and not waste too much time.
I guess the other question
is, lactose intolerant, could I use like goat milk?
You could use goat milk.
Yeah, or almond milk. You can milk some almonds. Or find a little almond nipple and make yourself an almond bath.
All right. So before we get into this, then that just, so they found this guy dead here in Sacramento, and the cops come in.
That's a good way to start a podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
So, he's covered in like, Cheerios and Frosted Flakes, and, the news people come up and, the cops like, we think this is the work of a serial killer.
Oh my God.
Bad joke.
Wouldn't it have been like that new Magic Spoon stuff though, if he was like a healthy serial killer?
Right.
Isn't that That's a new healthy way to have your cereal.
It is. I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, it's honestly not bad. My kids like it. They've got like peanut butter chocolate and Fruity Loops and cinnamon crunch. And I tried the peanut butter chocolate, but I was disappointed because it didn't give me the same itchy roof of my mouth like the old school peanut butter Captain Crunch did. So, for me, it's got to have the entire sensual experience for it to truly be old school nostalgic cereal.
Totally. Well, Ben, so, I think the first thing that we want to chat about, we use the term biooptimization a lot when I think we're talking to, people in the realm of this world. And I'm curious what your take is on the pure vernacular of hacking. I think hacking by and large is never really considered to be a positive thing in the sense of nobody calls you up and says, dude, my computer just got hacked. It was awesome. So how does biohacking in its pure vernacular compared to this idea of optimizing what we currently do and can do to live a better life?
Well, I mean, really they're the same thing, different words as you've just alluded to. It's just that biohacking is the term that has caught on just because that's the term that's been widely thrown around by all the folks who I think are probably kind of like leaders in that movement of self-optimization. It's just a term that's come in handy and has lent itself well to viral popularity. But really, they're the same thing, although I would say maybe biohacking, as we've already kind of alluded to, also carries with it that flavor of perhaps a more ready embracing of technology, right? From red light panels to cryotherapy chambers to pulse electromagnetic field therapy. And, some of the things that people involved in self-optimization might choose, things like sunlight or grounding or earthing or like we were talking about, whatever, like a mortar and pestle and some leaves instead of capsules. But I mean, really, they're both going after the same goal. I would just say biohacking maybe is a little bit more embraceful of the technological component of things. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you're doing the same thing. You're just seeking human optimization, preferably in a smart, and I would say in the case of biohacking, just as the name implies, almost like as highly efficient a way as possible. And the efficiency component of it does often mean that you're using technology, right? If I can deliver the same amount of, let's say, negative ions or, the opening and closing of cells and the influx of, human resonance into my body via like laying on a high power PEMF table for 20 minutes versus say like a 2-hour walk outdoors barefoot, maybe I'm going to choose the PEMF because I'm time crunched, and maybe that's going to be classified as a little bit more of what one might consider to be like a biohack.
Makes perfect sense. So I guess in that realm too, you clearly have embraced so many of these technologies, so many of these practices in an effort to not only live better, but inspire so many people to do that. So what does a day in the life of Ben Greenfield look like?
Well, my days are honestly, they're a little bit Groundhog Day-esque to a certain extent, though I'm not as funny or charming as Bill Murray. I wake up, I embrace a lot of, spiritual optimization tactics. First thing I do when I wake up is breath work. I do gratitude journaling, do a little bit of meditation, about a 7-minute meditation during which I'm doing about a 6 count in breath work. I do some tapping. I do some journaling, typically about what it is I'm grateful for. I do some Bible reading. I do some prayer. And then after that, I'll usually do like a little bit of mobility exercises and foam rolling. I'll typically do some type of self-deep tissue work and mobility for about 10 to 15 minutes every morning. And I do get like a full body massage once a week where I'll lay out on actually one of those PEMF tables and a sound therapy mat and just do a full meal deal workout by a therapist. But, every morning I'll do some mobility work, which I just, I swear by that for kind of keep my body put together. And, I'll often do it using some of these technologies. Like I have one of these things called a biocharger in my basement and one of those pulsed electromagnetic field mats. And I'll kind of combine some of that with a bunch of mobility, stretching, foam rolling. And that's usually for about 15 minutes after I've done my morning spiritual practice. And typically, I've got some water heating up for tea or for coffee or for mushrooms or whatever I'm gonna drink that morning. And then after that, I go in my office and I'm typically reading research articles, journals, kind of going through science. I find myself pretty receptive to just learning shit in the morning. So I'll typically do that for about a half hour or so while I use red light therapy. So I've got some of those red light panels in my office. Just kind of set up my office to be really nice. I use like an essential oil diffuser and some red light therapy. And I stand on one of those grounding mats. That's actually literally like there's a cable going from the mat that I stand on to a stake that's planted in my backyard. So I'm just basically, harnessing the ground while I'm standing inside barefoot in my office. And typically I've got like some really good lights in there too, like lights that simulate more of the broad spectrum of sunlight in my office, versus the bedroom, which is all just, red lights and really low intensity lights. After I do that, I'll typically take a little Pomodoro break. I got a kettlebell on the floor of my office. I'll do some swings, do a little bit of movement for a couple of minutes, and then dive back into whatever frog I got to eat for the morning, which is typically, an article, a book chapter, or a blog post. And I write for usually 30 to 60 minutes. I'm up pretty early. I usually get up about 4:30 or 5. So, by then I'm finishing up all my writing and, some of the major work for the day by around 7:30 or 8. And by then my family's up and around. So I gather the family and we just have like a little family bonding moment. Sometimes we go out in the backyard and we'll dance to a good song. Sometimes we'll meditate. Sometimes I'll just hug everybody and chat with them about their day and just have a little family meeting about what everybody's got planned for the day. But, I try to around like 7:30 or 8 before, my twin boys and my wife kind of scatter to the four corners of the earth to go about their day. Just some family connection time. Although most of our family time occurs in the evening, which I'll get to. And then after that, once I've kind of bonded with the family, I'll typically go and have my morning poo, which is always wonderful and glorious. I love it. And
glorious poo.
And my big morning glorious poo. And then I work out. Usually do about a half hour workout. Like sometimes I system right here, I'll show you. Sometimes I'll wander out to what you would consider to be more of like a biohacking environment, like in here. And I'll use, like the Vasper and hypoxia and like vibration and, all kind of like the more crazy tech stuff that I have in my fun gym, or I'll go out to the garage gym, which is more like kettlebells, sandbags, kind of more traditional strongman equipment. And there's also like, there's kind of my backyard and I've got, ropes hanging from the trees and a bunch of like obstacles built in, mostly from back when I used to do a lot more Spartan racing. So sometimes I'll do that in the morning, but usually I'll do like a half hour workout in the morning. That's a little more challenging. And then at that point, I'll jump back into work. Well, I should say I have a quick, like, breakfast for me it's not a big affair. I make myself a quick smoothie, and usually it's kind of like just like a lower calorie, like a bone broth, stevia, just something I can suck down real quick while I bang out a few emails. And, I usually my big meal of the day is dinner, but I have a little bit of breakfast usually just because I want something after that workout. And then, I spend but like that mid, like 9 a.m. till around 1 or 2 p.m. I'm typically either talking to clients, doing consults with anything from clients to companies I've invested in to, execs to, just like all the phone calls and meetings that I have allotted for the day, or I'm on podcasts like what we're doing right now, or I'm interviewing someone for my podcast, right? But typically between about 9 and 1, I'm on the phone or on Skype or, recording something with someone. And then typically, 1 or 2 rolls around and I'll have a little salad with some fish for lunch, kind of a smaller lunch, kind of like my breakfast, but real nutrient dense lunch, a lot of good vegetables and fish, some omega-3, sometimes a little bit of, seeds and nuts and, sometimes some root vegetables, just like a real healthy, multicolored omega, like a Mediterranean style lunch kind of. And then I take a nap, like literally, like almost every day. That's kind of how I get up so early and manage to still have a real productive evening and time with the family and stuff, is I swear by that afternoon nap. So I have one of those hyperbaric chambers. It's like a sensory deprivation chamber for me. I climb into that thing, so I'm breathing pure oxygen. I'm at about 1.4 atmospheres, and I'll just go dead to the world for like 30, 45 minutes. And I find that's about all it takes for me, because usually I'll sleep 6.5 to 7.5 hours at night. But then that afternoon nap seems to give me kind of the equivalent of feeling like I've had like 8.5 hours of sleep for a 24-hour sleep cycle. Get up from my nap, sometimes after I nap. A lot of people find this, like I'm a little bit groggy, like I need a little jump start my day. So sometimes I'll go like do a cold pool soak. Sometimes I'll do another one of those biocharger sessions and some more mobility work. Usually I'll just spend like 10, 15 minutes just kind of waking myself up. And then I start the second half of my day, which is usually like more calls. That's usually when I'll really start to like dive into the email inbox hardcore. I find that if I do more like the creative, productive stuff in the morning, I'm really better off doing more of the reactive stuff in the afternoon. I like to kind of make sure that all the so-called important stuff is already done in the morning, so that in the afternoon I'm just free to be able to reply to emails, reply to other people's needs. I have a supplements company, so a lot of times I'm working with my team, doing like formulation calls or business calls or and again, like a lot of emails, a lot of meetings, mostly with my team in the afternoon. I'm usually wrapped up with all that around like 6:30. And I like to do something active before dinner. Sometimes I'll go for a walk. Sometimes I'll grab the family. I'll go play a little tennis. Sometimes if I wasn't able to squeeze in a workout in the morning, I'll get my workout in then. Sometimes I'll do a sauna session. But usually I kind of like to end the day before dinner with something active too. And then like around 7:30, we just gather as a family. We like make amazing meals together. My kids have a cooking podcast, so they love to cook, and we make amazing meals together. My wife's a great chef, and we just gather as a family and have fun making dinner. And then we all sit down and we play games for like an hour and a half. One of my favorite things to do is I'll take my family to Barnes and Noble like once a month, and we'll just buy a whole bunch of new games. And we play games like almost every night during dinner for an hour and a half, just sit around laughing and playing and having a great time. And then we typically go up to my boys' bedroom after we clean the kitchen and play music. Like we'll play some guitar songs and sing. And then we usually have story time for like 15, 20 minutes. I'll read them a story and then tuck them away. At the very, very end of the day, we do meditation where we all close our eyes and we play our whole day like a movie in our mind. And we use these journals to write down like what we did good that day and what we could have done better that day, and where we felt really connected to our purpose statement, like this process of self-examination. So you can just learn from your day. And during that, we do like a 4-8 breath work to just settle down our bodies for the evening. And then the boys fall asleep after that. My wife and I go into the bedroom, and, sometimes I'll read, sometimes we'll make love, sometimes I'll just go to sleep. I'm tired. And then, get up and rinse, wash, and repeat. That's a typical day in the life.
I love that.
That's amazing. So yeah, I mean, you've clearly have taken all of this research, everything that you've acquired over a kind of a life of studying this, and applied it to a lifestyle. How do you coach people to get to a place where all of these decisions, everything in their day, is proactively about living a better life? Because I think that's one of the things people like to talk about. Biohacking, biooptimization, they like to talk about being healthy, but as a true practitioner of that, there's a big jump from where most people are at and where you live your life day in and day out.
Yeah, that's a good observation, because I find like a lot of people hire me mostly because they know all this stuff. It's not like they're dumb and they haven't heard stuff on a podcast or read it in a book. They just want to know how to systematize it. And that's kind of my job. Like, so if I have a client who's paying me for coaching, which I don't coach a lot of clients now, because now I've trained like 100 coaches who work under me, who work with a lot of clients, because I've found I'm just not able to work with everybody. But, I've got about 12 people who I coach one-on-one. And honestly, like every weekend I sit down and I map out their whole week for them. Like that's how I spend a great deal of my Saturdays. Is I literally calendar it all out. Like it's like, here's when you do your red light therapy, and here's when you do your gratitude journaling and your meditation. And here's your workout for this day and your workout for that day. And, sometimes they're traveling, so things will be modified. And I map it all out on like the workout calendar for them. I do the same thing with their diet, based on everybody I work with gets really extensive, urinary hormone testing and gut biome testing. And we do food allergy testing. We do genetics testing. We do blood testing. We do micronutrient testing. And so I sit down with all the lab data and create their customized nutrition and supplementation protocol. So I give them, what they're supposed to eat, and then kind of like their whole routine, but not just their exercise routine, right? But also, when you journal, when you meditate, when you walk. And, everybody's life is different. So sometimes, especially for my super busy folks, I'll write it out in such a way that's like, so here's the 5 things you need to do today. You decide where you're going to do these. Here's the best time to do them. But, all they got to do is kind of check the box. All my clients kind of have me in their back pocket, not for phone calls, because that's really hard to schedule, but I use an app called Boxer. Still does it, which is kind of like walkie-talkie. So they can just like ping me when they want to ping me and ask me a quick question, like whatever. I'm going to a steakhouse tomorrow night, Ben. What should I get here? Or, I heard you talk about this on a podcast. You think this device is something that I should get that would work for me, or whatever. And that's actually, it's like required if you're going to be coached by me. Like you got to listen to all my podcasts and read my books, just because I don't want to have to be repeating stuff to clients that's already out there that I've already recorded. So anyways, a lot of times they're asking me questions about that kind of stuff. But yeah, I use that Q&A to kind of fill in the gaps. Sometimes some emails here and there, but mostly just verbal Q&A. And yeah, so that's kind of how I lay it out for people. And, it's not exactly what I'm doing per se. It's what's, necessary for them or customized to them, but I certainly weave in a lot of the things that I do myself.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ben, because I would argue that that's one of the challenges that we as a, dare I say, industry face, is this kind of standardization that what I do, you should do, and you're going to have the same results. And I love that you said that, because I do feel that there's a systematic approach where people are like, well, if you follow all of the protocols in this one book, then you're going to, you live to be 150. And
yeah, it's like, if I've got a client who's like a female with, let's say, like small intestine bacterial overgrowth or something, she's not going to be having like a huge fermentable lunchtime salad, nor is she going to be doing, especially if she's a premenopausal female, like a 12 to 16 hour daily intermittent fast like I might do, right? Like I wouldn't have her fasting any longer than 10 to 12 hours, just because women tend to see a downregulation of a lot of their endocrine system with frequent longer fasts that exceed 12 hours, or people with certain gut parameters might need to eliminate certain food groups that I enjoy and that I eat, or, that same person might have, whereas I have, genes that dictate that I'm actually unable to harness appreciable amounts of vitamin D from sunlight. So therefore I supplement with vitamin D. For others that might create, vitamin D toxicity and arterial calcification. And so I never, ever assume that like, oh, I'm doing the perfect thing, and so everybody should just do what I do. I really think that we live in a day and age where self-quantification is so readily accessible that it's just smart to quantify. And although there are lifestyle practices that we know are going to be good for just about everybody, yeah, some semblance of fasting at some point, the length is going to vary. Some semblance of protein restriction on certain days or during certain seasons for longevity. Definitely, no matter what you're eating in a parasympathetic state, in a mindful state, preferably with people, like our big family dinners, typically a wide variety of herbs and spices and rotational foods, and eating in season, definitely low level physical activity throughout the day, occasionally lifting heavy things, sprinting or playing sports. Like there's stuff that you can say are broadly applicable to just about everybody, but then there are definite subtle nuances that need to be tweaked from person to person.
Right. Ben, I have a question. So Evan and I were discussing, you mentioned, and we've talked about fitness and sport and working out, and we've discussed, can you have performance, longevity, and aesthetics all at the same time? Or do you think that you can only work on one? Or is there this area where you can have all three?
Well, it depends. I mean, our appreciation for symmetry and beauty and even muscle and what you might argue would be aesthetics is largely driven by the fact that many of those variables tend to be associated with someone who is, harder to kill, who, traditionally may have been a warrior or a provider, who may have had some genetics that lent themselves to beauty and symmetry, who probably ate a diet comprised of a variety of fat-soluble vitamins typically available to those who would maybe have been of a wealthier subsector of the population, and this been associated with greater degree of societal success. And so a lot of our built-in appreciation and also our natural appreciation for beauty and aesthetics, just based on, even more deep principles like, sacred geometry and the symmetry of nature and Fibonacci sequence, and, a lot of these things that we see in nature and also built into living organisms, we have a natural appreciation for those type of aesthetics. And I think that's natural. And then I also think there are societal influences on aesthetics, such as, say, Arnold's bodybuilding movement of, the 90s, or the skinny, lean, veinous, veins in your abs marathoner movement of the 80s, or the unrealistic expectations set forth by like the the Rocky craze, also the 90s, that dictate that society and particularly media is able to portray. They're able to take those aesthetics and then portray them to an extent that we feel as though what was once just symmetry and basic strength and access to good food gets morphed into an unrealistic expectation of what the human body should look like. And I think that's where it can become unhealthy from an aesthetic standpoint. The same thing for performance, right? We know that people who can function well, work with their hands, be able to walk long distances, be able to help out on the farm or, carry a baby or whatever. Like those are all values that tend to lend themselves well to societal stability and survival. And yet then again, when, particularly from a media or a peer pressure standpoint, we then take that to the nth degree and say that everybody should be able to do a triathlon or run a marathon or do a Spartan or deadlift 600 pounds. Then you, similar to aesthetics, create unrealistic performance expectations that go far above and beyond what I would consider to be reasonable performance expectations. But I think that if the performance expectations are reasonable, right, I'm capable of taking 10,000 steps a day, and I can lift my body weight, and I can do enough to be able to provide for myself and, whatever, dig a hole and lift a rock and build a fence and play some tennis or some golf or whatever. And from an aesthetic standpoint, I've shown that I'm taking care of my body and not letting myself go to pot. I think that those are completely synonymous with living a long time and being healthy. But I don't think that marathoning and bodybuilding and boob jobs and Botox and some of those extreme elements of performance and aesthetics that sadly, based on media and peer pressure and some societal implications, have developed into what many people expect to be the norm. I don't think those are synonymous with health. And of course, the research keeps on coming out. If you look at heart health alone, right, we see shifts towards insulin desensitization, poor mitochondrial function, poor glucose tolerance, some scarring of the heart, et cetera, in response to both ultra endurance as well as excess high intensity interval training, right? So we know that there's definitely a boundary that you can cross when it comes to performance, or a boundary that you can cross when it comes to aesthetics. And for things like, let's say, Botox or boob jobs or things like that, I would say from an aesthetic standpoint, a lot of times the risk lies more not in biological overuse of organs, but rather introduction of toxins or artificial compounds that might be unhealthy for the body, or a dependence on external variables upon which you rely for your own confidence and self-esteem that can just develop into an unhealthy psychological scenario. So there's a lot of avenues to explore in your question, but ultimately I think that performance, health, and aesthetics they're all appropriate bedfellows, but it depends on your definition of aesthetics and your definition of performance.
Right. Yeah. I guess we were kind of discussing maybe if you're, an ultra endurance runner or, a football player or an elite CrossFit athlete, how long can you live, and how well can all of your organs and parts work functionally, for how long if you beat yourself up over time?
You're definitely, based on all data I've seen, to cut straight to a very short reply, you're going to decrease your lifespan. But you might enjoy life more, right? If you're climbing a whole bunch of mountains during your lifespan, we know you're going to degrade neural tissue with that amount of hypoxia. And, we know that if you're CrossFitting all the time, no matter how much joy you derive from that, you probably are going to develop some heart scarring and some arterial calcification that would dictate a shorter lifespan from a cardiovascular risk standpoint. But if you're happier your whole life and you live to be 80 instead of 83, then there's an argument to be said for the amount of life satisfaction that you get from that. If it really is life satisfaction, not, satisfying an exercise addiction, I don't think you can necessarily vilify that. And, you could come right back and say, well, the people who are avoiding that type of exercise, but then spending their entire lives fasting in cryotherapy chambers, cold, hungry, and libido-less, might live till they're 120, but not have an enjoyable life. So I think it all comes down to balance. And ultimately, if you look at things from the most important standpoint, making maximum impact with whatever unique skill set God has given you and whatever unique purpose you've been given in life. And if you're caring for a body in such a way that your health span and your lifespan allow you to make this world a better place and to love others and love God to your full capability, then I think the rest is just details.
I think it's a brilliant answer. And
Yeah.
and we've, I think a lot of people get caught up in the academic conversations. Is CrossFit healthy? Is marathon running healthy? But, what do you enjoy? I love what you just said about purpose. So that brings up the question, well, what is your purpose, Ben?
It changes. I mean, I think everybody should have a unique purpose statement for their life. I think you got to be able to kind of like say that one single succinct purpose statement, so that if you have, for example, a self-examination process like I was describing earlier, you're really able to say, yes, I was engaged in an activity today or activities that fulfilled my life's purpose. And often that purpose is, involves things like things you were naturally born talented with, or things you enjoyed to do when you were a kid. What makes time go by quickly for you now, or just, brings a smile to your face and puts you in the zone. What other people say that you're good at, if you ask your parents or your friends or your lover or your children. And when you weave all that together, I actually have an article on my website called How to Find Your Purpose in Life. Then you should be able to take all of those and hone it all down into almost like a tweetable statement, right? Like a single succinct purpose statement for your life. So like mine used to be that I wanted to live in a way that empowered others to live a more adventurous, joyful, and fulfilling life, which for me, when I was doing a lot more, competition and travel and, some of those more hardcore things like Ironman and Spartan, it really did feel fulfilling for me to be able to say I'm inspiring people, I'm teaching people, I'm living life to the fullest, I'm adventuring. And, I'm in a different phase of my life now in which my purpose statement is to read, write, sing, speak, compete, and create in full presence and selfless love to the glory of God. Because I really realized that through all my adventuring and, all these crazy things I was doing around the globe, there were some things I'd fallen away from that I liked to do when I was a kid. Singing, dancing, dreaming, reading, writing, creating. And so I redid my purpose statement a couple of years ago. I'll probably sit down with it again next year sometime and assess it. I try to assess it on a yearly basis, and sometimes it stays the same and sometimes it changes, but that's what it is right now. And that's kind of what it's fueled by, what I like to do when I was a kid, what I feel truly connected to now, what makes time go by quickly, where I feel I'm most able to love other people, and what puts me in the zone. And so, like yesterday when I was doing my self-examination process, as I'm playing that movie in my mind, almost watching myself in the third person, like a character going through my day, I identified that the most purposeful thing for me was working on a chapter of a new book I'm writing yesterday morning. The day before, it was teaching my children and literally actually doing a workout with my kids and teaching them like 3 different new workout moves, right? And so, it varies from day to day, but for me these days, usually it's writing something that I know is going to be meaningful and help people, or teaching my children or teaching others. Like those are 2 things that I find most satisfy my particular purpose statement right now. If I had to hone it down to like the things that just pop up almost every day when I'm doing that journaling practice.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Well, and I think that, the challenge is we get so caught up in these physical things, right? Like, do this laser light therapy, put this melatonin plug up your ass, all these different things. But like, what is that really getting us, right? Like if we're living longer outside of our purpose, are we really even doing what we should be on this earth to do?
Right. And I think, the 2 aren't necessarily, they don't counter each other necessarily. Like if I can put melatonin up my ass, have a better night of sleep and be more purposeful the next morning, great. If it takes me like an hour to figure out, to do my whole melatonin protocol, and I'm obsessed with it and I'm attached to it. And, as Anthony DeMello writes in his book, Awareness, I literally rely upon that for my happiness, and it's becoming an unhealthy obsession. And I freak out if I'm trying to sleep and I realize I'm out of melatonin. Then you start to get to the point where some of that stuff becomes silly or trite or distracting or unpurposeful. But if those are simply tools that you use to equip yourself to be more purposeful, and they're not taking so much time away from your purposeful activities that it becomes selfish, then, I think they do have their time and their place.
Yeah. And since all 3 of us on this particular podcast have had melatonin up our ass, I think we can say it's not an obsession. It's just it's a tool for a better life.
Hey, I've had melatonin, CBD, and NAD up my ass simultaneously and done a coffee enema the next morning. So beat that.
Oh my God, that sounds
That's
really enjoyable.
My ass is like a suitcase.
Hopefully a carry-on, not a checked bag.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think we're running out of time here unless you have another quick question.
Well, I did want to touch on something because you've really talked about purpose as the individual. But one of the things that I was really inspired by on your social media is a trip that you take with your wife every year to really kind of redefine your marital purpose. And I might not be getting that correctly, but I know that that's something that you focus on. And with so many relationships challenged, especially in the wake of COVID, with all of the technological distractions that we seem to be dealing with, I would love for you to touch a little bit on what you do to really make your relationship with your wife as special as I think we've all kind of seen it to be.
Well, you are right. For the past 4 years, either quarterly, not even as infrequently as yearly, typically quarterly to twice a year, my wife and I take off somewhere where we're out of the house. No distractions, no laundry and children and just everything else that's at home to distract you. Like, I have nothing against staycations, but in this case, I don't think the house is the place to do it. So we'll take off to some other place. Like our last place we went to was Sedona. Our next one planning on is Kauai. Usually like to choose somewhere with good energy. We just go off for about 2 to 4 days. We take journals. We take our laptops. We take basically what we would need to really write down and systematize the things that we talk about and come back with in terms of ideas for our relationship or ideas for our family. Sometimes we will take plant medicines or synthetic medicines, like MDMA or psilocybin, or some cases we even have a practitioner. In this case, our practitioner is in Nashville, who we go to, who does more like couple therapy with a different variety of plant medicines, where the first day we'll get in a really good space. That type of medicine isn't necessary, but I found sometimes it can accelerate the process of just putting a bunch of truth serum in your system, merging the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And then typically, we use these chairs called backjack chairs that allow you to sit in bed facing each other. And we'll just sit in bed facing each other and talk in kind of a little bit of a different space, like a medicine space, for about 4 to 6 hours. And then the entire rest of the trip is spent kind of building on that conversation and also planning out more logistically, we should start doing, whatever, Wednesday night tennis evenings with the boys, or, they keep, River and Tara and our boys keep talking about this and this that they're super interested in. How can we forge a path for them to really equip them to be able to do that more in life? Or, it really annoys me when you drink all the coffee in the morning. What can we do about that? Like everything from the trite to the big. And then we typically come back with lots of ideas. So you say, yeah, those would be like kind of like that would be like the big trip or trips that we do each year. But then we also, like I mentioned, we have that family meditation every morning. My wife and I pray together every night. If we're dead dog tired, like we fall asleep just in a hug, praying with each other. We snuggle together every morning. We play tennis together. We go on a date every week. And again, the date is more time spent just talking and having real meaningful discussion. We just have, for any of our dates or any of those type of times, it's really a no judgment zone. That's just an understanding between us. We can tell each other anything from things we wanted to try in the bedroom that we've been afraid or apprehensive about approaching our partner about, to, things that have annoyed us that we've noticed our partner developing tendencies to do, to things we love or appreciate about our partner. We also really operate based on the principles of love and respect. There's a great book about this called Love and Respect. Women tend to need more love, more hugs, more care, more love. Men tend to do okay, or at least better, without so many hugs, without so much love. What men really get fueled well by is respect. Like, I notice how hard you're working today, honey. I really see that. Or, I just really, really love how you led the family today, through a difficult conversation that we were having. Like, so she knows I really thrive on respect. I know she really thrives on love. And so we really go out of our way each day to make sure and speak that language to each other of love from her to me, or love from me to her, and respect from her to me. And that's kind of woven into our day as well. We also know each other's love languages. My love language is words of affirmation. Her love language is time, right? So I know, even if I do tell her I love her, or even do tell her that she looks beautiful in that dress, like, what means more for her is if I say, whatever, you look beautiful in that dress. Would you like to just take like 45 minutes tonight before dinner and go off with me and play a little tennis? Like she really gets fueled by actual time with me. Whereas for me, the tennis isn't as much as if she just, comes up to me at the end of the day and says, you did an amazing job with work today. I saw how hard you're working and how much you try to provide for the family. Right. So learning each other's love languages, really operating on that principle that in general, women need more love, men need more respect. carving out time to pray in the evenings, meditate in the mornings, and then having those times when you just get off and take a deep dive. Those are a few things that we do in our relationship that I think really help us to stay bonded. And, we've been married for 18 years and it just gets better and more magical every year.
That's amazing.
I love that. That's great. Great tips and advice.
Well, we're about out of time, Ben. So is there anything else you want to ask?
I was just going to ask if you had any just random off the cuff top tips for wellness. Like what would you recommend as a blanket statement for everyone? Like top tips, what can people take away from this podcast?
Sure. Let's see. I'll see if I can compress it into 60 seconds. Go outside barefoot every day. Get sunlight every day. And if you're in a gray area, just use light, use infrared light, anything like that. But harness photons of light every day. Go outside barefoot or ground every day. Have heat and cold as an integral part of your practice. Sweat regularly, get cold regularly. Expose yourself to those discomforts of cold and heat on a regular basis. And then drink lots of clear, pure filtered water with a lot of minerals. And if you throw all that stuff in to eating healthy and moving well, and then tackling some of the things we talked about in today's podcast, like staying connected to your life's purpose, loving others and loving God, you're going to have a lot of your bases covered.
Perfect.
Awesome.
I love it. That's
Anything
all I
else?
got. No.
Yeah, that's a mic drop moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Cool. Well,
Ben,
I appreciate
thank
you
you
guys
so
having
much.
me on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll have
Thanks.
to do it again soon. Like, once the world opens up, we can actually do these in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
That's
Podcast
amazing.
Fest for Spartan.
Yeah. As long as I don't have to get a pokey poke to come down there, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, you already had COVID, right?
Yeah, I've had it. And I realize it's a serious issue for a lot of people. For me, it was like I had the sniffles for a morning, but yeah, I have had it already. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I appreciate you guys. And thanks for doing what you do. And next time I'm in Sacramento, I'll have to hit you up and, Mark Bell and the weird English guy and all those other people.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Ben. We really appreciate you. I think as a leader in, we can call it biohacking, we can call it biooptimization, but the truth is that we need leaders like Ben to help pave the way, not just in all the physical things that we can do, all the technological things that we can do, but more importantly, the spiritual things that we can do. Because all the red light therapy, all of the melatonin up the ass means nothing if we don't have purpose in our life. And I think Ben has his finger on the pulse of what it takes to live a life well. So we highly encourage you to check out all of his information. Of course, you know who he is, but we'll put his info on the show notes as well. And we couldn't be more thankful to have the man, the myth, the legend on the Complete Human podcast.
Much love you guys.
Awesome.
Ben,
Thanks,
thank you
Ben.
so much.